So I think it's safe for us to get started. Um, I want to welcome everyone. Welcome. My name is Ebony Rose Thompson, um, and I'm the chair of the Ward 7 Education Council. I want to make sure before we start, I recognize our exec board members um, who are on the call. I'll let you all introduce yourselves. I don't want to call on people, or I can.
Hi, I'm Nzinga Tall, corresponding secretary.
Laura Fuchs, recording secretary.
Maxine Elbert, parliamentarian.
And I know Vanola's driving, but she is our vice chair. We have two guests this evening. So both of them are here. One is Elizabeth Davis, who is the president of the Washington Teachers Union. We have been talking about reopening for months now. And we're going to continue to talk about reopening, so we don't need to talk about reopening anymore. So we are thankful to have Ms. Davis with us because the Teachers Union has done some really strong work around advocating for not just teachers, but whole schools, including kids and families. And then we also have Matt Frumin with us. We are a member of the Coalition for DC Schools. And one of the things that may have fallen off of people's radar, but is still ongoing and really important, is the comp plan. And we always want to talk about that, how that affects schools, because we care about planning. So since you all know, I'm gonna do a last call at about 8 o'clock. I want to make sure that we turn it over to our guests fairly quickly. And start the conversation. So I'm going to go to Miss Davis first. Miss Davis? Oh, wait a minute. You're on mute.
To unmute myself. Thank you.
Great.
So thank you for inviting me. You know, I'm a member of Ward 7 Education Council from way back in the day when I was teaching at Sousa Middle School. Also a member of the Ward 8 Education Council and the Ward 5, where I live now. I'm glad to see that Matt Frumin is here. Members of our board, members of our union, are members of this executive council. And also WTU is a member of the C4DC Coalition and the amazing work that they're doing. Today, and I'm going to keep my comments very short, Ebony, because in case anyone has questions, I don't want to tie up a lot of time. We are now negotiating a memorandum of agreement. WTU developed the safety checklist on DCPS, adopted it, slapped their letterhead on it and passed it out. However, they were premature. They sent it out to parents, held a press conference saying that WTU agreed to it. Basically, they had extracted items from the safety checklist that we insisted must be on there. Issues related to HVAC, standards by which HVAC systems were purchased, whether or not DCPS had in fact consulted with experts on HVAC and ventilation systems, namely ASHRAE, which is a local chapter here in the district. So we pushed hard to get the answers to that, get the safety checklist to a point where it had enough details for parents and teachers to use in order to conduct the walkthroughs. And then of course, we were able to get DCPS to agree to the walkthroughs because they had no intentions of doing that. We also suggested that the local school advisory teams be a part of those walkthroughs, mainly because DC Public Schools has not been very transparent and forthcoming with information, questions that parents have been raising around the reopening of the schools, wanting to see evidence that the schools were in fact ready for reopening, and wanted to see if all schools had actually instituted the CDC, the Department of Health, the OSCE guidelines for safely reopening buildings. And because our teachers worked in those buildings in March before we closed for the pandemic, they know what realities exist in every school. And they're not going to trust the mayor or the chancellor to simply say that the schools are ready, much like parents. You know, with DC, there's been a major trust issue in DC for years, as long as we've been under mayoral control. It's been like a wall that went up between teachers and parents and DC schools. So the safety checklist was developed. We finished that, but we've not finished the memorandum of agreement. The last two sticking points in our memorandum of agreement basically would give teachers the option for term 2 to opt in or out of in-person teaching. Now, the chancellor and the mayor thought that is going to be a problem for them. That would not ensure that they would get the number of teachers they needed for in-person teaching. But we asked the question, how many teachers do you need? How many seats are available? How many students have responded? No answers to those questions have we got yet. And each time the chancellor respond, as early as this morning, he met with his contract team and our team this morning briefly. We asked some of the same questions. Now at this time, the walkthroughs are being conducted to determine if in fact all of the schools meet the criteria on those safety school readiness checklists. The memorandum has one item included in it that says, and the chancellor agreed to it, if the school does not meet those metrics on the safety checklist, then it will not reopen. Now, what I'm discovering already, I met with the building representatives in each school today at 5 o'clock. And some of the report from the building reps is already indicating that DCPS does not implement anything with efficacy. They've identified that their school used 2 different checklists, that members of the walkthrough teams were asked to sign the checklist before they even conducted the walkthrough. And this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to establish trust with DC Public Schools. We are certain that we're going to finish the memorandum of agreement. Mayor Bowser wanted me to agree on Sunday afternoon to give her the authority to use information that she collected or that DCPS collected from the surveys conducted illegally with our members. 2 surveys, one sent out in September, one in October. And of course, the Public Employees Relation Board ruled that both surveys were illegal and that DC Public Schools could not use any data collected from those surveys. She wanted me to basically undo the ruling from PERB and give her the authority to use that data, which we could not do. Now we are at a point where we're trying to ensure that parents and teachers in every school and any other individuals that want to participate in those walkthroughs will be able to do so and to check off with their list, report to the WTU and to DC Public Schools if in fact their schools met every metric on the safety school readiness checklist. So these are some of the questions that we're haggling with right now and some of the issues. The final one is Mayor Bowser does not believe that the union has the authority to negotiate working conditions for teachers for terms 3 and 4. And that must be included in the MOA. So those basically are 2 issues. One, for teachers to have the option to opt in or out of in-person teaching this term. And 2, that the WTU will be able to negotiate and bargain for how the in-person return to schools will happen in terms 3 and 4. That WTU members must be engaged in that process at the table. It must be open and transparent, that parents should be engaged, and that none of it should be, and of course, from school to school, some of those reopening plans will differ because we do know that schools are different. In Ward 8, we have some schools with no central air, some schools that with windows that won't open, schools that have not had a custodial staff in place for years. So every school, every team, basically we're reporting different things. But we see now as of today that we're going to have to fact check those surveys, fact check to see if the safety checklist in every school in fact was conducted by LSAT members, parents, and teachers. We want to know who they were, and we want to know if they signed the documents and if they checked off with notes everything they perceive. We also asked them to take photographs of what exists in their schools and not be shy about that. So we're looking, and of course, I really cannot say enough about the support that we've gotten from parents in every ward. The press conference held at School Without Walls Francis Stevens on Monday had parents, thanks to Sharice Muhammad. And Sharice, I can never thank you enough for pulling together parents from every ward in DC. So when the mayor called me to say it appears that the union is not thinking about all children, I said, Mayor Bowser, we have parents that are standing with us. We have the principals union standing with us. We have the Central Labor Council. We have council members and the city auditor asking the same questions of Chancellor Furby that we were asking and have not gotten answers to. So this process is quite opaque, and parents are not trusting it, and neither are teachers. So I'm gonna stop there, Ebony, because I'm sure that a number of questions that you may ask, you may think that I have the answers to. I don't. The media asked me questions that I should be asking them to answer. I said, well, it seems that the media is getting answers to questions before we do. You're getting information from DC Public Schools before the union or from parents. So the process is not very transparent, and it's because of that, and knowing what we know about what existed in our schools pre-pandemic, we're simply not trusting the mayor's word and the chancellor's word that all of these schools are ready for safe return. So I'm going to end there. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you for coming. I want to make sure people are able to ask questions. We have been really good about, so housekeeping note, please put your questions in the chat. If you are on the phone, let us know if you want to ask a question. You can unmute yourself, but I'll do a call for questions on the phone. It's helpful to us both so we can keep a record of like what is asked, because Laura is taking notes. She is our recording secretary, but also that way we are true to the spirit of the questions people are asking. So I'll wait for a moment to allow some questions to go in the chat. I know people have questions. So we'll give it a moment. I guess I'll ask a question. I went on a walkthrough of Kimball yesterday, and we were provided the checklist when we got there. We were asked to sign off at the end as far as these are things that we saw, not saying that we were in agreement. And the principal wrote on the official version and took back any notes. He also gave us each a copy of it so that we have the checklist. Does that sound like what was supposed to happen? Because we were not provided anything in advance of the walkthrough to know what the logistics or criteria would be.
We asked DC Public Schools to do training for all of the walkthrough teams. They promised to do that. I think that ended up being a webinar. And it sounds like you didn't even participate in that.
We did watch a video.
Okay.
Right before, but I asked because I'm assuming there are other people who will also be attending as LSAT members or other capacities on the phone, and just so they know what to expect when they get there.
Right. And, I know that from school to school, different principals may interpret what they're supposed to do in different ways. As of today, 2 schools reported that LSAT members were denied opportunity to serve on the walkthrough team because they were teachers who did not opt to do in-person teaching. That is not a part of the plan. The second thing is we want a set of all of the safety checklists from each school. The WTU want that, and we want the building rep to be provided that list from all of the members who participated in the walkthrough, just a copied set, so that we will be able to go through the responses on our own and make determinations based on the responses. So we also wanted members of the walkthrough teams to know that if they wanted to accompany their checklist with photographs, they can also do that. But having a follow-up, which would be a list that each of the members of the walkthrough team would submit to the DC Public Schools and to the WTU. If the school should meet all of the criteria, if it doesn't, those items that it did not meet, and then we want to follow up as to how those items are going to be addressed. If it's something that requires additional work, maintenance, facilities would have to show evidence that that work was done before that school could reopen.
Great. I'm going to go to the chat. So the first question is, how can community members support WTU efforts to improve transparency and authentic engagement by DCPS as reopen plans evolve?
One of them is to continue doing what you're doing. I know that a lot of you are writing letters to the chancellor and to your council members, also to the mayor. Some of the part of the plan, the first part to basically assign teachers from the high school to the CARES classrooms was problematic. Immediately we identified how that was going to impact students who those teachers serve, librarians, counselors, service providers in the high schools and the middle schools and education campuses, to relocate them, reassign them to classrooms with elementary age kids, and abandon their own role and responsibilities in their own students was not a good plan. And one of the reasons why the WTU gave the plan a vote of no confidence. So, and then of course, what has happened, a part of that plan actually led to increased class sizes for virtual classrooms, up to as many as 40 students. 40 students, even in a virtual classroom. That is outrageous. So having parents and our allies to write letters and support what Sharice Muhammad did, the LSAT from McKinley, and of course, building an alliance with other workers in the schools. The nurses that are in the schools contacted me today, their president, wanting me to know that they're holding an action and a press conference about the fact that the health suites in their schools were not ready. And in some schools, teachers reported that they were denied access to the health suites. They were told that they were not to go into every part of the building. That's not a part of the plan.
I have another question from the chat. The school-specific checklist, and I also want to recognize, because I saw part of this was addressed by Sharona Robinson, who's on the line. Most of you know Sharona works for DCPS in the Office of, I think you all are still called Community Engagement. Will says,
Yes, the Office of Communications and Engagement.
thank you. The school-specific checklists are on DCPS Reopening Strong website, but they're separate by building. Is there a master spreadsheet of these data? Do we know collectively how many schools have passed the walkthrough so far? Sharona added in the chat that she's not seen the spreadsheet, but she's happy to ask for one. Liz, I don't know if you know of anything that is forthcoming.
Amy Meister, the deputy chancellor for elementary schools, promised to get the WTU a schedule of all of the walkthroughs so that we'll know when they're scheduled, when some have been canceled. And of course, Amy indicated that a few were canceled, not canceled, she said rescheduled to accommodate a few council members who wanted to join the walkthrough teams, which I was excited to hear because we basically shared all information with them that we shared with DC Public Schools. And of course, some of the council members are curious for information, some of the same information that we're requesting. So we want the schedule of when each school will do their walkthrough so that we'll know when they're all completed. And then of course, we want further a follow-up training for all of the walkthrough teams to know how those lists will be used, how that information will be used, that they simply did not do that as just an exercise in futility.
Grace notes that they were told the walkthrough was limited to 12 people and emailed the following video link.
Yes, it was, and we agreed to that. The reason is we initially had about 22 people, and of course their reasoning was that they did not think it was wise to have that number of people in close proximity in any one building at one time. But you're going to have 14,000 students. That's interesting. So
can I ask a question, Liz?
Sure.
This is Sharona. So like for example, School Without Walls, Francis Stevens had more than one walkthrough because of exactly what you're saying, of it being over the capacity of 12 people. As I put in the chat, I've been, of the 11 elementary schools I provide support to, I've participated in 7 walkthroughs with one more to go. I guess my point is, are we, or have there been questions to potentially schedule another walkthrough, just, again, so, as many people can participate as possible. And as I also mentioned in the chat, I've encouraged pictures during the walkthrough, or even if people feel comfortable, video, because of the fact that the capacity is so small, again, to show, what has been done, whether it's the HEPA filters, or when I was at Garfield, they had a partner that provided student desk shields. So, like that was included. So I think as much as we can ask, I think, it should be asked. So I was just curious.
I agree. And Sharona, the fact is, the chancellor agreed that he wanted parents and teachers to trust this whole process. He wanted them to see the evidence for themselves. If that's the case, it's not going to add any additional resources to DCPS for them to allow additional parents, if they want to conduct a second walkthrough or a third for that matter. We actually wanted any individuals who wanted to participate in that to do so. The buildings, if we're preparing these buildings for students, and we said that they were going to be ready on Monday of this week, anyone that requested a walkthrough should be able to do so and see for themselves if in fact all of the safety protocols that DC Public Schools has said has been instituted has actually been instituted in every building. So that should not be a problem. We will make the ask along with a few others because we're following up with our building reps to see how the walkthroughs were conducted, whether or not all members of the LSAT who were members were allowed to do so. And we know that even if 12 people cannot, 12 members may not agree. We want a building rep, if they can't go, to designate someone else. If a parent can't go, designate another parent. The idea is for us to have parents and teachers and community members involved in this process.
Yep. And then the last thing I'll say is during the walkthrough, if there were things that needed to be escalated, those things, I escalated those things in real time. So if there were questions about when, let's say the HEPA filters were coming, I wanted dates as to when they would be arriving in the building. So that way, if those questions were asked during the walkthrough, they could be answered at that particular point.
So the HEPA filters have not arrived at one of your school sites?
So at one site, they're scheduled to arrive tomorrow, but at a minimum, so what my point for saying that is, I think sometimes, to your point, the trust is not there for various reasons, and I definitely get it. I was at least able to show those folks what the HEPA filters look like because of going on other visits, but I was also able to get them the answer in real time to say, your filters are scheduled to arrive on Friday. And from there, I did say, if they don't arrive on Friday, please follow up with me so then I can circle back.
And term two
begins on Monday.
On Monday. And there are some schools, and I'm sure that is not the only school that is waiting for HEPA filters and other things to arrive. And I'm sure that that's a part of the reasons why the mayor decided on Monday morning to not reopen for in person. Of course, she used the union as being the obstructionist for that, but that was an easy way to go. She wanted to say that the staffing issue was the reason why. But what I do know is that the procurement system for DCPS has a lot to be, it has a lot to be, I know how slow that process is.
Yes, and the fact that things are being ordered, for different school districts across the country at the same time. So everything isn't coming in, at the same time. So there were even situations where the HEPA filters had arrived at the school, but they weren't taken out of the boxes yet. So it just varied. But at least I was able to ask that question, get an answer, and then, we were able to move forward.
Right.
So that was my, purpose for attending and participating.
Right.
Just to, again, support those school communities and, like I said, share those pictures on social media or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I saw some of the pictures outside of School Without Walls, Francis Stevens. They were not not good. It clearly said that school is not ready, much like Rich Stroger said, it is not ready to reopen.
Yeah, I'm not sure when those pictures were taken, but I, was on the walkthrough today. So again, remember I said there were two. So I was on the first one, and then there was another one that was more so for the LSAT and parents, and that was, I want to say 5.
Okay. Well,
see noted in the chat that some of the checklists on the website are not correct.
Yep, I've escalated that too. To my understanding, those documents, I guess, are ever changing. I'll just, put it like that. But if you are finding that schools, the website, the checklists are not accurate, please let us know.
And just for the record, there is absolutely only one checklist. Only one. The only one that WTU and DCPS agreed to is the only checklist that every school should be using. There should be no variation. There should be no duplicates. There should be one checklist. And what we will do to ensure that every school that DCPS is providing the right checklist to the teams that walk through, we're going to send all of our members the checklist that was approved by DCPS and WTU, because there's only one.
Liz, can you send that to, well, I guess Laura and Maxine will have it, but we're happy to provide it as well. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I know we have a bunch of LSAT and other people who'll be attending walkthrough.
Right. Okay.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Sharon already answered this one. Allison agrees it's super problematic. People should not be turned away. Sharon is going to follow up on the spreadsheet. Okay. Four council members sent, Suzanne noted, four council members sent a letter on Monday to the chancellor and suggested there be a reopening working group form that included teachers, parents, and principals. Does Liz think this would be a positive way to move forward? If not, how can we move forward to safely reopen?
That is actually has been one of our recommendations as well. And believe it or not, it was a citywide committee that was comprised of parents, teachers, community representative, organization leaders, all of that. They simply said they did not want that to be a part of our MOA and struck the entire part out of it. And I didn't think that was a heavy lift. We also included, two community representatives, two experts on health. And of course, they had a problem with that. They said DC Health is our expert. Okay, we have community members who are also. So we are absolutely love the idea and would be happy to work with Suzanne and others on pushing that from another angle in another place.
Khadijah asks, is there any requirement for DCPS for how long they have to conduct walkthroughs, address issues in the buildings, and fix the buildings? And have there been any discussions about alternatives in the event that many buildings are found to be unsuitable? For example, libraries, etc. I'm thinking in particular of Ward 7 and 8 schools, which based on my understanding have a larger proportion of unrenovated buildings.
Correct, you're right. And of course, in our MOA, I was surprised that Chancellor Furby's team agreed to this proposal, but I think it may be item number 8. If the school fails to meet the criteria on the safety checklist, it will not be reopened. But even still, I'm looking closely at how this checklist is being utilized in each school and how it could be information could be misinterpreted. Some principals basically asked teachers to sign a checklist before they even did the walkthrough. So we're going to have to keep a very close watch on that whole process to make sure that the results of the checklist are going to be analyzed by DCPS and the WTU. And but not only that, a few experts that we've consulted with, the Black Coalition Against COVID, and a representative from ASHRAE, the American Society of HVAC Engineers. We basically want to consult with those results to see if in fact, and not rely totally on what DCPS's opinion is. Because Chancellor Furby may decide that a school with windows that doesn't open, having a HEPA filter in a classroom that might be 40 by 60 feet is sufficient. And that may actually exacerbate the problem, according to Dr. Reed Tuckson, who says, if the air is not circulated properly, airflow, how is it measured? What standards were used? All of those details is what we want parents to be aware of. We want them to be able to ask those questions, and we want them to be able to see evidence that is actually installed or instituted properly. So we're going to have to do a lot of follow-up, and we need parents with us on that, much like we had the support of parents in saying, show us the evidence. The mayor cannot ignore all of her constituents. Now, she may be able to ignore teachers, but she cannot ignore all of her constituents. So when she indicated to me that we were only representing the views and opinions of a few people, I wanted her to know that this is all over the city. So, and we're going to keep pushing, but we need you to push with us. We're going to share with not only our members, but also with the parent groups that we built relationships with, PTSOs, the MOA when it's finalized, and everything that we're doing, because you have to actually model the transparency that you want to see. And that's what we want to do.
Thanks, Liz. Sandra notes on the care tributes. DCPS still plans to pull secondary employees to staff care. Every person in every school has responsibilities we all depend on. What can we do to protect them if they are not WTU members? This is killing morale when morale is in an already traumatic situation.
And and that I'm not sure what individuals Chancellor Kirby is going to use to staff the CARES classrooms. That plan seems to be changing daily. Initially, it was going to be teachers from the high schools, the middle schools, the ed campuses. Later, it became possibly the paraprofessionals. Now I'm understanding that the mayor is seeking to hire 600 contractors. These are individuals who are not certified educators. We have no idea the details of what that is about, but I did make a call to the president of the AFSCME Council 20 Union on Monday to share with him information that I had received, because he was not aware of the hiring of these consultants, contractors, whatever the mayor wants to call them, who will be paid higher rates than the paraprofessionals. Paraprofessionals who have been working already directly with teachers, who have been engaged with students and know the student, will be paid less than these contractors. And I wanted him to know that that is an area that he can certainly address with the PERB. And we're going to have further discussions about that. Of course, we union leaders are very careful not to cross lines when it comes to engaging with members of other unions. But because I forged a relationship and built a very good alliance with the presidents of the other 4 unions, the nurses, the principals union, Teamsters union, and the Paras union, I think on this issue, we really need to work together and collaborate.
Awesome. I have a question from Suzanne. Does Liz know what schools are doing to reach out to families who are not connecting to virtual learning? Do individual schools have efforts to address the issues these families are facing, or is there a DCPS effort to reach these families?
Oh God, I cannot answer that. I do know, Ebony, that we have almost 6,000 students who are in homeless shelters. And when DC Public Schools say that they've reached out to our families, many of them still are not online. Many of our students still do not have access to devices or Wi-Fi. The chancellor, of course, inflates information when he reports it. But what I rely on foremost is information directly from teachers, which is the reason why we survey our members, for them to let us know how many of your students are not coming online. Why? How many students have not received devices?
I'll have to.
Right. So beyond that, Suzanne, I cannot answer any. And of course, we're open to any ideas you may have as to how we can do a better job of doing that. Because one of the things I do know is that teachers have greater access to the 50,000+ parents than anyone else. They do. And having them to engage with their families, of course, they reach out. The information that we receive 9 times out of 10 is coming directly from teachers.
I think Sharona was trying to jump in.
I think she was.
Can I provide some feedback to that question, please?
Yes.
So my name is Diane Woods. I work with DC Public Schools. I'm also a Ward 7 community member. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for sharing that information. In my role as a family service specialist, I work with our early childhood families. And I can tell you in my role, what I do. I'm not sure if this is across the board with everyone. At the beginning of the school year, teachers received an introduction letter from me that they provided to the families. They put it on their Microsoft Teams and in Canvas. There was also, as the early childhood program, we had families to complete a family needs survey. So on that survey, we asked questions like if you need immediate assistance, it could be with housing, domestic violence, substance abuse, food. It covers an array of things. And then with some schools are better than others, they have an attendance tracker. teachers are taking attendance daily because there have been issues with Canvas where students cannot access their class through Canvas, so they're going directly through Microsoft Teams. So what I've done to help support that is I monitor that tracker, and then I cross-reference it with Aspen. Aspen is the attendance tracking system that DCPS uses, and that would capture attendance properly if Canvas was working. So that's why I make sure that I ask the teachers to utilize their tracker. I cross-check with Aspen, and then I can update whatever, if kids are marked absent or when they were really present. And then when they reach a certain amount of days of not participating or engaging, that's when I'll do follow-up calls with that family. And we have a referral process for that. So if I notice it on the tracker, or if a teacher sends me a referral because they've checked in with that family and they say, hey, Ms. Woods, this is what's going on. This is the referral form. Can you follow up? I'm able to follow up that way. And that's pre-K3 and pre-K4. So each Title I school is assigned to a family service worker. We do have multiple schools, but that is one way of follow-up. So we are trying our best to engage, but I do agree, teachers are like the glue that helps us make all of that happen.
Mhm. Diane, I have one question. So the family service worker is assigned, every school has one or just certain schools?
No, so that's elementary schools
Right.
that have the pre-K3 and pre-K4 programming Title I. Because most of you know we lost that Head Start funding, so the supports and wraparound services look different. But if it's a Title I school, you have a family service worker, and we now are either robust or targeted schools. And just for like speaking on Ward 7 and 8, those are mainly our targeted schools because the need is a little bit more intense and needs more case management. Just historically, we've seen that trend. But every school has somebody assigned for early childhood to support with engaging and reaching out to families and making sure that they have whatever they need. And also on that survey, we inquire if there are any technology or device issues. So if families note on that survey that they do not have access to internet or they are in need of a new tablet, we're able to follow up with that as well.
Are you finding that you have a percentage of families that still do not have devices or internet connectivity?
In my experience, I have with my schools, I can only speak, I have 3 schools. My schools have distributed devices. Some parents had to go back to exchange for whatever reason or get the hotspot reset or things like that. And then say, for instance, I had a family that was in a shelter and she has multiple children. So we made sure that I connected with the social worker at the school and she delivered the device to the parent. So whatever the barrier, and that was from a teacher saying, hey, I haven't seen this student online. Can you follow up with the family? As far as internet connection, that has been like an up and down, just to be honest. And then if that's the case, I've connected families with the tech person in the school, or if I know they didn't have Wi-Fi at all, I send them a link to complete the application to get the Wi-Fi.
Okay, and the family with more than one child, is that parent receiving a one-to-one device or just one device?
For early childhood, I can only speak to early childhood. I know she has 3 children in the home, but that child for early childhood was assigned their own device.
Okay.
And that should be the case for all. My understanding is that each child should have their own device.
Absolutely.
They should not be sharing a device.
No, that just creates more challenges on top of the ones they're already having. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I guess the natural other question would be for students who still haven't enrolled, because it seemed like we stopped getting an account on how many students who haven't enrolled. Is there something DCPS is doing to reach out to families? Sharona, you might know.
So schools are still doing that. Of course, we know the electronic count or audit, if you will, was October the 5th. And we also know that, you know, families have, there have actually been some families who have left to potentially go to charters because they were offering in-person learning. And in some cases, some of those families are returning. We've also found that families have left the DC area for various reasons. So it's a mix of things. Um, and then I think just in general, there have been parents who have struggled to complete the online enrollment form. You know, whether that's due to lack of technology, illiteracy, you know, et cetera. So schools have literally been talking to parents over the phone, especially if they are what you call an OSCE verified parent, meaning they receive TANF, um, uh, or you know, medical assistance or support from the housing authority. So there's a basically like an MOA between DCPS, or I guess more like OSCE, and the Department of Human Services. So like that, to me, you know, as someone who used to do enrollment, like that's your low hanging fruit, because you don't have to get that person to bring like a pay stub or, you know, the driver's license and registration. So those are, you know, really quick, easy wins. But like I said, registrars were literally calling families and walking them through that process, and they were getting that information from them over the phone.
Thanks, Sharona. I'm going to go back to the chat. We have more than a few questions and comments in there. We are at about 7:15. We're probably going to end up, and we still haven't talked to Matt. So bear with us. Patricia Stamper, I think she sent it probably to me, but wanted to send it to everyone. Evening, she wanted to ask Ms. Davis, will she support encouraging the WTU to consider outdoor learning?
You know, we actually have, even before the pandemic, the WTU encouraged teachers to participate in Outdoor Learning Day, actually over a year ago. And of course, we do know that that option is not available to all students in all communities, but absolutely. And of course, still there are issues around safety that we need to consider, even with outdoor learning. And if it's done well and with efficacy, with the support of parents, with the engagement of parents and teachers, I think that it is something that's doable. But it would vary from community to community. So yes, we do support it, with conditions that must incorporate safety measures, the same safety measures that we need inside of our buildings. We also need them outside. I was with Marcus Batchelor at Hart Middle School before the pandemic. We were doing an equity tour. We toured Deal Middle School and went straight from there to Hart, not basically to show the disparity in resources. The teachers had the same passion and dedication and commitment, but the difference and what resources were available in those two schools were glaring. And outside of Hart, we stood there with some individuals from, I think it was Journey for Justice, and Marcus Batchelor was called away because a shooting occurred at Savoy, outside the gate, right outside the fence where little kids were playing outside for recess, and it was a fatal shooting. So, you know, from school to school, from ward to ward, we've got to consider the realities that exist in the communities when we talk about programs, pods, whether or not families in certain parts of the city can even have the resources to create pods. So if we're not careful, we may end up, you know, creating or basically amplifying some of the inequities that we already have in our school district. So, yeah.
Yeah. Question from Rhonda Humphreys. Has General Counsel or the Chancellor made a statement about liability and wraparound support for staff in the event a staff member becomes ill due to an unsafe reopening?
No, we had that conversation very briefly, and the mayor nor the chancellor want to have any further conversation about that. Our last proposal was to provide additional, whether we call it a stipend or an incentive check for teachers who committed to do in-person teaching. We identified the source of funding for it. DC Public Schools received a RISE grant of almost $30 million. So we basically said, you know, if you want to incentivize teachers to return, we do know that we have teachers who who want to return. All of our teachers do actually. And we surveyed them months ago. But the ones who said, sure, I'm ready to return to in-person if I can get answers to these questions. And they're the same questions we're asking. So it's with the conditions that the whole process for how they will return, it would be done safely. So, you know, we wanted to provide hazard pay. And this is not the first time we've raised that issue. We actually proposed language in the contract before the pandemic to provide hazard pay to all of those teachers working in the Centers for Incarcerated Youth, IYP, YSC, New Beginnings. And they were open to that. But when I raised the issue around incentive pay for teachers who want to return to in-person teaching, there was huge pushback. However, they're now revisiting that, and I don't know what that means. I don't think it means that they're ready to agree to it. But if the chancellor sees that it might be a challenge for him to find a number of teachers that he'll need for term 2 or 3 or 4, they may decide to find the funds to provide an incentive. We're not sure. But as far as liability, they won't have any discussion about that because that would be a huge consequence for the city and for the school district.
Okay. Brittany says she doesn't know if this was brought up, but how is testing going to be done at schools?
Oh God, please don't mention testing. I hope you're talking about COVID testing, correct? Okay. But you meant park. All right. Testing will be done in the MOA. We have a provision that requires rapid testing in every school. Initially, they wanted to only make it available for teachers to go and get tested at some of the sites around the city, sites that will be closed during inclement weather. So that's not what we were going for. We really wanted to ensure that testing would be available on site in every school. Chancellor Furby indicated that they will have rapid testing available in every school. We are actually going to have to discuss greater details about how that will be done, how often it will be done, and what will it be based on.
And did they say who is responsible for conducting it?
I think that has something to do with the call from the Nurses Union president today. I think it will be the health expert person that the chancellor identified. He took out of our MOA the term nurse in every school because obviously he knows that there is not a nurse in every school, even though the council passed legislation almost 2 years ago to ensure that there would be. He said a health expert or nurse would be in every school. So most likely it will be this individual. Beyond that, I don't know who else would do that.
Okay. Patricia Sniper notes, as a parent, I support outdoor learning. As an educator at an elementary school, I'm willing to teach in an outdoor setting. I'm also willing to send my child to learn in an outdoor setting. Suzanne notes, she was on the call DCPS had last night on reopening, and most of the parents who spoke up supported DCPS reopening. I feel this reinforces DCPS's thinking that there's a broad support for what DCPS is doing regarding reopening. We need to be sure parents with concerns about reopening speak up at these future updates DCPS does. Diane, thank you, Diane. Diane says, as an ECE family service specialist and Ward 7 resident, she's willing to assist with sharing information with families and getting their feedback. She works in Ward 7 and Ward 8 elementary schools. We can let her know how she can help. We'll get, and I think Nzinga already is on top of getting your information. Thank you. Sharona notes, to my understanding, there will be no WTU members as to staff classrooms. I guess that applies to the care classrooms.
That's correct. So as of, and that's new. So I've literally heard that yesterday. That's the guidance that principals have, that they are not allowed to ask members of the WTU, and those they do ask, they have to ask for volunteers to staff these care classrooms.
So that's going to leave people like deans of students and APs.
Probably not assistant principals, but potentially like clerks, paraprofessionals, ISS coordinators, behavior tech. So it looks different by school. So it depends on the staff makeup at the school level. And then also we have to remember, let's just say no one volunteers. So then that's where that, sort of backup workforce comes in. So that could potentially mean that, a principal is reaching out to their instructional superintendent saying, I don't have any volunteers at the school level. Where's the pool of available folks I can pull from?
Thanks, Sharon.
Sharona, I just have there are individuals at the central office that used to be based in schools. Are any of those individuals being considered? I mean, there must be hundreds of them.
A lot of those folks are no longer with us. Like, remember, we've been reorged probably twice. So a lot of people have, those positions have been, in some cases, totally written out. The way that the cluster support team works. So for example, I support 3 clusters. So I have clusters 1, 9, and 10, and then I have 2 schools in cluster 8. So I have about 25 schools that I provide support to across the city. So not just in Ward 7 and 8. Like I have School Without Walls of Francis Stevens, McKinley. So it varies, but essentially you have content leads for math, ELA, SEL, science, supporting clusters. So we are central office employees. However, we support schools, but we don't work at schools. So
and that was my and that was my question, that maybe some of the people at the central office need to work at schools in the CARES classroom.
And I was getting ready to say that essentially we have been told that we could be put in CARE classrooms, but also remember, and again, this is also new information, schools will offer at least 1 CARE classroom. So remember, initially it was one classroom for in-person learning for every grade level, through 5th grade, but that has since changed. So a lot of like what you see at these school walkthroughs will be sort of null and void because it might only be 1 classroom that's operating at the school. So just keep that in mind. All of this stuff is changing.
Yeah.
And the CARE classrooms, aren't they upper grades now, like 3rd through 5th or something? Not the younger kids, because I heard they're having.
It can be younger. It can be younger kids, but again, it's based on staffing, and then it's also based on needs. So, like, let's say, for example, there are no pre-K 3 families at a school or pre-K 4 families, so then it wouldn't be a CARES classroom for them. The minimum number of students in a CARES classroom is 9. The max is 11. So it's a lot of different factors, because remember at first, so we're all sort of still operating or thinking of what the original way was going to be, but that is not the case anymore. So people may have already been offered in-person learning seats, but we now are going to have to go back to the drawing board since things have, again, shifted to, simply discuss and figure out, one, are there people who are willing to volunteer to provide support in a CARES classroom? Then how many families want to come into a CARES classroom? And then on top of that, are the students or the families who are trying to come into the CARES classroom, are they properly immunized? So that's a whole other situation too that I think is continuing to get missed in this conversation.
And Sharona, can you just say briefly the difference between a CARES classroom and the regular in-person instruction, just so everybody's on the same?
Absolutely. Yep. So regular in-person instruction would be a grade level or / content level teacher providing in-person instruction.
Is this me or
I think she's.
Sharona, you're freezing up. She doesn't know.
No, she doesn't.
Okay, we'll come back. Because we got
I wanted to hear the difference.
I'm gonna mute Sharona so she can unfreeze herself.
Yeah, and let her know that she is freezing.
Yeah, and then
Okay, is that better?
yes.
Is that better? Okay. All right. Sorry. And I actually accidentally pushed airplane mode. I was like, wait, it kicked me out. Okay. So the difference is in terms of the CARES classroom, again, it's going to be a cohort of students. So it can be, remember I said the minimum is 9, max is 11. So it might be students in grades 1 through 3, but they are learning virtually physically in school, but they're being taught by their classroom teacher that they had during the virtual experience. So the students will have headphones, they'll have their device that that they bring from home to school and that would stay at school. And they would, be supervised by non-WTU members in that classroom space.
Thank you. Patricia Stamper notes also today her colleagues and herself were informed by their principal that the ruling was in favor of WTU, not AFSCME, CSO, and Teamsters. They were informed that they can volunteer or a principal could go through their surveys. Ironically, by close of business, we had enough volunteers to staff a hybrid classroom for grades 2 and 3.
So, is that a question for?
I don't know if it wasn't, I don't see a question mark, but what I took from that is, I know Patricia's not a WTU member, but she is a member of Ask Me, I think. And so they were told that the ruling, the PERP ruling didn't apply to the other unions that are also in buildings.
Right, it doesn't.
Sharona, schools should absolutely be reaching out to students, families who are extremely disconnected. That could be by way of this school social worker, connected schools manager, school level partnerships coordinator. Khadijah has a question. Is there a consensus on what DCPS can do to support teachers in reaching and supporting the most vulnerable students? Or if no consensus, what are some things you have heard from teachers that DCPS could lean in on to support with? For example, using different programs, more social emotional learning, support and resources, etc.
Yeah, and it's the distance learning, and one of the major issues has been for special education students. We've recommended some platforms and actually some training for special ed teachers that's been provided by the American Federation of Teachers. But we've also encouraged the school district to partner with us on providing teachers additional PD on distance learning, period, because we need to get that right. It's not just how to use platforms, Zoom and Teams. It is also about focusing on content, how to connect to special education students, what curriculum can be available for special ed teachers, and how do they engage online with special needs students. So there are a lot of issues, especially around SPED and ELL, but we have tapped into the rich resources that are offered by the American Federation of Teachers, webinars, training, PD. We've actually decided to train 2 or 3 of our WTU instructors on how to provide quality PD to teachers for distance learning, pre-K through 12, content specific, but more of a focus on special needs than anything else, because I do believe that that has been one of the greatest, most challenging areas for special ed teachers, service providers, providing services to students online. Many of the students who they could not even connect with for different reasons, but focusing more attention and time and PD and resources on special need populations and ELL students. So, and we're open to any assistance. We actually asked Chancellor Furby to partner with 3 of the universities here that WTU has reached out to: American University, UDC, and Trinity University, on how they have delivered distance learning. UDC admitted that they have basically been bringing courses online. American University has been doing it, and they readily stepped up to offer assistance to the WTU in the way of allowing our teachers to engage in courses that they are offering online, but also helping to train our instructors on how to deliver better quality distance learning to students, how to engage with parents and provide additional support for the parents who need to help their students or work with their students. So we need to really hammer down on how to get distance learning right, better than it is, because even with the hybrid model, even returning to in-person teaching, we are still going to have a component of distance learning that we need to improve on a lot. And some teachers are reporting that they're having major success with distance learning. We have not really done an assessment of how that is going on every grade level. One of our high school teachers said today in contract negotiations that her attendance rate has gone up tremendously as a result of distance learning. So we need to take a look at that. Everything is not falling apart in distance learning. We do know that there are some students that are just more challenging to reach and serve, mainly because of their status. IEP, managing caseloads online is challenging, but our teachers are doing an amazing job with limited resources and with limited support. And we need to do better at providing those resources and support and
So
identifying what they are.
I know we're approaching 7:40. Um, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to cut off Laura. That last comment will be the last question in the chat because I don't want to cheat anybody that got in there first. If there are additional questions after that, please still put them in the chat because we want to make sure we at least share them. We'll probably end up going till about 8:15 because we do still want Matt to share, and there might be some questions for him. Liz, are there any two questions? One, are there any examples of districts that are doing either distance, I'm tired, y'all, distance learning or in-person return really well that you hope DC would model?
You know, and I'm glad you asked that because only a couple of days ago, I contacted our regional director for AFT to see if she can do a quick outreach to all of the affiliates across the US to see. And she said that there were some, but I have not been able to get that. She's going to provide me with that so that we could possibly reach out to those affiliate leaders. But I asked the same question. I don't know of, and I'm sure that we may have some right here in the district. Because we've not gotten any data on the 12 schools that reopened. I have not been able to get any data on how successful that has been. And one of the major problems we have is data sharing and this, getting information and feedback, because I'd be interested to know. I did receive from a few teachers at one of our elementary schools in Southeast. It's in Ward 6. They were sharing how the outdoor learning was going. They were actually conducting classes outdoors, and they were excited about it. And I'd like to hear more about it. But as far as other jurisdictions, I don't have any information yet, but we're looking to get some from through our AFT regional director. And we'll share it with you, Ebony, as soon as we do.
Okay. Diane, actually, this question is for you. So based on your work as a family service worker, and it came from Suzanne, what are you finding families who are not engaging in virtual learning need? Are most of the problems technology related, or are there other problem areas you're finding?
So just to be honest, I work with the pre-K 3 and 4. So their devices came a lot later. So that was the initial concern. For the most part, that has been resolved and they know how to go in and swap out devices. But now it's just everybody's just having a hard time. So families are dealing with things, just trying to meet basic needs. So that's why it's important that in my role that I reach out to those families to see what's the barrier, because it's not just as simple as they don't want to. Sometimes they just really have things going on. So it's important to do that follow up. Like I have a parent who's going through some immigration things where the father is somewhere she doesn't even know where he is and they're going to deport him. So it just to have to deal with that and 3 kids in the home, it's a lot. So then now you're backed up on rent. It's just it could vary, to be honest, and that's why in my role it's important to follow up and help them get those resources that they need, because until the basic needs are met, I mean, you can kind of just, they're going to be disengaged.
Thank you for that. Scott is making another push for encouraging DPR in schools with larger enclosed outdoor spaces to provide it that schools that need it, as far as making sure we can provide outdoor learning. Diane, I see a response. Thank you. It's taking notes. Sharona, thank you for following up with Suzanne. Patricia wanted to clarify if it's hazard pay or a incentive pay. I think it's safe to call it hazard pay.
Well, the mayor has already said she's not issuing any hazard pay to anyone, but we call it incentive pay. Whatever she wants to put label on it, but it's an incentive, basically. And we pitched it as a way of getting enticing teachers who may be borderline in terms of whether or not they want to return to in-person or not. We surveyed our members, as I said earlier, and we have a list of teachers who said they were ready to return. We're not going to turn that list over to DCPS because we don't want them basically pressuring those teachers. Each of them responded to our survey with questions. So in order, and basically a meeting has been scheduled with those teachers and Chancellor Furby at a later time, maybe for term 3, where they can get their questions answered. And then they can make an informed decision as to whether or not they're ready to do so.
Liz, the next question in chat is, do you know of any top lingering demands from the principals and nurses union or SEU? And also, do you know if the incentive pay is applicable to the other members also, or if that's just a WTU possibility?
That's just for WTU. And just to let you know, because each union has its own leadership, we cannot negotiate for other members of other unions. I recall the chancellor in one of our negotiation sessions accusing me of attempting to negotiate for the nurses union, which I was not attempting to do. I was simply saying that we needed to have a nurse in every school, especially now. And of course, he somehow correlated that to my negotiating for the nurses union. I do have ongoing conversations with the leaders of all 4 of the other unions. We share information. They wanted a copy of our MOA. I shared that with them. I shared the safety checklist because I think it's important for us to work together now. But as far as negotiating for other members, I cannot do that. The ULP that we filed, I could only file that ULP on behalf of our members. I could not do that for members in other unions.
Thanks, Liz. Sharona noted rapid testing is provided when student staff are symptomatic. Upon arrival, students and staff will have their temperatures checked. Testing will be done by the health professionals, nurse, or medical tech. Diane, central staff will be asked. Okay, moving down. Laura, she's demonstrating what a CARES classroom will be like in a DCPS school with bad Wi-Fi, AKA most of them. Bad joke. I think she's talking about when Sharona went out. Laura is going to keep us out of trouble tonight. And Zinga notes that Laura's back with her antics. All right, we're almost at the last questions. Thank you all for bearing with us. Diane noted that as a central office staff member, they have been asked to complete a survey to support CARES classrooms. To be honest, most of us have concerns as well, and we are not a part of decisions being made. Not to mention, a lot of central office staff are parents, have pre-existing illnesses, and other concerns. We have no union to back us, so she appreciates WTU. In her position, she's traditionally in the school and not the office. Her time is shared between 3 schools, similar to social workers who have 2 schools. And Sharona noted that she is not sure if the survey data is valid anymore, based on after the PERP ruling.
Well, it's not
Are you
valid.
about to say something?
I'm not sure if it's just only WTU, but at this point, I know principals have to ask for folks to volunteer. So again, if everybody is like, no, I'm not doing this, then the list of active volunteers, they will be pulled, to support the CARES classrooms at the school. And remember, schools are asked to have at least one. Some schools may have 3. Again, it depends on staffing capacity. And to the point of additional staff, I saw that there was a request put out by the mayor for substitute teachers as well as paraprofessionals.
Yes, I saw that.
Okay, Sharona did not complete the survey. She forgot. Uh, Laura notes she also did not complete the survey on principle.
Yeah, first time I said no, I wasn't doing it. The second one, I just
forgot. Allison agrees that distance learning is challenging, but not everything is falling apart. To your point, Liz, and that we need to investigate what's working well and where more support is needed and what that looks like.
Yes, absolutely.
Brittany wants to keep talking about reopening. Sharona said we can send her the chat if there are other questions, and she will follow up. Thank you, Sharona. Khadijah notes, as someone who works at a charter school, she would love to see what is working well in DCPS because they can all learn from school districts can all learn from each other. The partnership with universities, for example, is a really cool idea and seeing best practice for outdoor learning. Khadijah then asks, is there a way maybe to do a webinar series where schools, DCPS and charter could showcase what they are doing, a kind of distance learning collective? Sharona notes that might be something for the DME to facilitate. Brittany, for those schools that do not have PTAs or PTOs, how are they making sure parents understand what is going on at their schools?
I can answer that from my schools. This is Diane again. I know some of the principals are having like chat and choose or some type of morning meeting with families monthly. And then one of my schools is Savoy, and Principal Rosado has town hall meetings bi-weekly for families.
Sharona or Liz, do we know if a school, like I know that the LSAT, the PTA gets a designee, but if they don't have a PTA, how are we guaranteeing that there will be parents on those walkthroughs?
Great question.
Yeah,
you got it, Liz, or you want me to answer?
Yes, Sharon, you answer that.
Okay, so because a lot of the schools that I provide support to don't have an active parent organization for various reasons. So what I then do is have principals to use, our robocall system to call and email families to invite them to, request to be that parent representative, because it's up to 5 on the LSAT. So if we only have 5 parents who say, I'm a willing participant, then there's your 5. If not, then there has to be an election that, it can be facilitated by the principal or his or her designee, or that's something that the CAC specialist could support, if the school would like that support. Because in some cases, it's a contentious situation, so you want that outside support or need that outside support.
Yeah, and Ebony, I was building rep at Sousa Middle School for 5 years. There was no PTA there. I couldn't understand why. Parents really wanted the PTA. They wanted to organize it, but they were denied access to a meeting space in the school. I was not aware of that until one parent had shared that. So I encouraged the teachers to help organize the PTA and join it, and they did. And it became one of the most powerful PTAs in Ward 7. That group basically joined the Ward 7 Ed Council and continued working. But teachers have an opportunity to help the parents organize a PTA if there is not one in their schools. And there's so many benefits to that. Number one, it's going to build an alliance between the teachers and those parents. And secondly, the teachers have access to the resources in the school meeting spaces, because basically what I did was open my classroom up. Several teachers and I decided to have a Italian dinner, spaghetti, meat sauce, salad, and garlic bread. We prepared it, brought it in, and sent flyers out to all 450 parents. Well, guess what? 47 parents showed up that night to show you how desperate they were to have a PTA, but they simply had not been accommodated or provided any type of support from the local school principal, who saw having a PTA as a threat. So it would behoove teachers in a school that has no PTA to help organize it and join it. It says PTA, PTSO, teachers and parents.
Thank you for reminding us that the T in PTA is Parent Teacher Association. And thank you for coming and sharing so much with
You
us.
know, I'm not leaving because I have to hear Matt Frumin. I will not leave while Matt is speaking.
Thank you. All right, Matt. I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm not going to do like an introduction. We're at 7:52. So Matt, are you still with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough, Ebony Rose, and congratulations again, Ebony Rose. It's a great victory for our city and for you.
Thank you.
There will be hearings next week, at the end of next week, about the comprehensive plan that the mayor has proposed. And then in the coming weeks or months, the council will be thinking about that comprehensive plan and we'll be voting on it. There's some controversy about whether that'll happen this year or early next year. And the comprehensive plan includes a thing called the facilities, the education facilities element, which is relevant to all of us who care about education in the city. So first, just step back for a second. What is the comp plan? And it kind of is what it sounds like. It's the moment where the city steps back and tries to create a vision of what it would like to see in lots of aspects of the development of the city. The biggest thing, and the thing you'll hear the most about next week, is the future land use map, which goes to looks at every parcel in the city and considers what kind of density and what kind of uses could that parcel be put to. And that's important because the mayor has the idea that she would like to see a lot more housing built and a lot more affordable housing built, and that is important. It's also significant because in the development community, there's been a lot of concern about the way in which different projects have been blocked. And so there's a lot of pressure to change the comprehensive plan to make it easier to build developments around the city. And that's really the biggest piece of this. But there are about 20 elements. There's a separate document about arts. There's a separate document about parks. There's a separate document about education. The last time this was done was in 2016. Back in around 2017, the mayor thought we need to update the comprehensive plan. And the way they went about it was the agencies did outreach and the Office of Planning did outreach, and they developed proposed changes to the 2006 comprehensive plan. They put those out in 2019. We commented on it. 21st Century School Fund commented on the ideas that they floated back in 2019. In around April of, and different ANCs commented on it, all kinds of people commented on it. And then in April of 2020, the Office of Planning put forward its proposal for the council's consideration for the comprehensive plan. And now in November will be the hearings on that proposal. And we have focused on the education element. The input that we provided back in 2019, actually some of it was picked up. And there are things in the draft element for education facilities that are pretty good, but there are other things that are less good and cut against the things that we think are positive. In a number of places, the draft focuses on the importance of DCPS, the importance of the matter of right school system and the success of the matter of right school system in every community in the city, which is a very important priority for the C4DC coalition. But then elsewhere in the comprehensive plan education element, they propose to affirmatively endorse the idea of co-location of charter schools inside of low enrolled DCPS schools, which if you do that, you're going to make it very, very difficult, if not impossible, for feeder systems in big parts of the city to succeed. We had a big controversy around co-location um, in the budget process, and part of what people said was, you know, the proposal around co-location and the amendment to the Budget Support Act didn't change anything, didn't endorse the idea of co-location, but only created a mechanism of how the funding might flow in the event of co-location. This is different. This would have, if it were passed by the council, would have the council endorsing the idea that co-location should be encouraged, which runs directly contrary to the overarching theme that you see in places of the proposed education element that focuses on the need to support our matter of right schools. Another thing that's out there in the document that's been proposed is they base it on projections around enrollment that people came up in 2016 and 2017, and projecting lots of growth in enrollment. And one of the ways in which they projected enrollment was they asked DCPS and the charter sector both to project enrollment. In one model, they just added it up, and the charter sector had suggested enormous enrollment growth in the coming years. And so there's a thread in the draft document that we're going to have a real shortage of facilities capacity and we need new schools. Well, the projections about enrollment actually haven't happened even in the years running up to COVID in the way that had been predicted. And we already have enormous capacity in the system. And there's this fundamental question: do we invest in the schools that we have and try to build enrollment in the schools that we have, or do we keep opening new schools? And the comprehensive plan as drafted pretty clearly encourages the idea that we would keep opening new schools. And that looks like, again, if your idea is that you want the matter of right system in every community to succeed, to the extent that you keep opening and encourage the opening of new schools in places where there's already significant overcapacity, that's a real problem. So it's another way in which some of the themes in the comprehensive plan are undermined by some of the specifics in the comprehensive plan. A third thing that is in the draft as it's done now is it sort of treats the 2018 master facilities plan as if it had been adopted by the council. The issue about co-location comes directly out of the 2018 master facilities plan. And many of you will recall that there was a lot of pushback against the 2018 master facilities plan, that it wasn't really a plan and that it didn't have the kind of input and vision that we would like to see, because many of us for years have been saying we need the city to form a plan for what it wants to do with education, because if you don't have an idea of where you want to go, you're almost certain to end up someplace you don't want to be. And so really having a plan for what you're going to do is critical. And the 2018 master facilities plan was a muffed effort at that. And yet in this document, the way it would be treated is almost an endorsement of that plan as drafted, and just papering over the fact that that plan was explicitly not adopted by the council. So we are having these hearings in next week, which offer an opportunity, and the discussion of this comprehensive plan offer an opportunity for those of us who've been calling for the city to express a vision and express a specific vision that would really strengthen the matter of rights system in every part of the community, every part of the city, to talk about that in front of the council and to get with different council members and go through it and try to persuade them of our perspective on these kinds of issues. Yet another piece of it is every document like this has a lot of kind of patting themselves on the back for all of the great accomplishments, including the accomplishments in modernizing many schools. But everybody here knows that we have a significant number of schools that have yet to receive full modernizations, and the vast majority of them are east of the river. And so this gives us an opportunity to say that yes, we've done well at modernizing a whole bunch of schools, but it's critical that the modernization of the schools be completed by a date certain so that we get the schools east of the river that have not gotten the benefit of a full modernization into the capital improvement plan properly and modernized as soon as possible. So again, this discussion around the comprehensive plan gives us an opportunity to talk about a core vision for education in the city, the need to have a real plan to marry capacity to need, because to the extent that we have way too much capacity, it actually drives up the cost of education and spends more money on administrators as opposed to more money in the classrooms if we had a more efficient system. And it gives us the opportunity to talk about the need to complete the modernization process in every part of the city. The testimony on next Thursday and Friday will, even if everybody on this call went and testified on the comprehensive plan, we'd still be drowned out in a sea of testimony by people who are interested in the future land use map and either supportive or concerned about development in their community or the need to develop more housing. But we want to be heard, and then we want to have meetings with each of the individual council members to talk about how they can, with a modest number of revisions to what has been proposed, turn this document into something that offers a real vision for how we should proceed in the development of our education facilities in the next 10 years. And given that that's the topic that we wanted to talk with people about for many years, this really is an opportunity to talk about it in a tangible way. So I'll stop with that, and if folks have questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Okay, I see a couple of notes. So first, Allison, Brittany, and Sandra agree with you. We should totally invest in what we have, where today's kids are in school. Khadijah is the first in the chat with a question. I wonder if for the comp plan, can the modernization of East River schools be connected to the work WTU is doing to ensure buildings are safe? Sharona notes school modernizations are tied to the PACE Act. Matt, you look like you were about to chime in there.
Yeah, well, I can respond to both of those things. School modernization, well, the first one, yes. Part of what the comp plan talks about is what kinds of things we expect out of all of our facilities. And so safety is a thing that would fit naturally in the discussion of what should every school be and what are the safety requirements that we would want to see there. That could easily fit into the comp plan, very naturally fit. I can't say right now whether it's in there. These are issues in the current draft. This is an issue that's moved to the front burner in the COVID process, and that's long after the document was drafted. There certainly is some safety issues in there, but the current work that the WTU is doing, it may be that we need to look at this draft and think about how we capture that in the in the document, but it would fit naturally and it wouldn't take an enormous amount of change to the document. School modernizations are tied to the PACE Act, but that is true. The number of school modernizations we do has actually gone down in recent years. We've been investing less in the modernization budget in recent years than we had at the beginning, when there was more of a sense of urgency about getting it done. And there needs to be as powerful of a sense of urgency about getting it done now as there was when the project was first started. You can't kind of peter out of energy on this topic while there are big communities that have yet to be served. So it isn't to say overturn the PACE Act. It's put in enough money so that we can finish everything that needs to be done by a date that people can see, whether it's 2028 or 2030. It might take a while because it takes, there's a planning process and there's only so many schools that can be done. But we have to return the sense of urgency to complete these schools east of the river. It is criminal that we haven't gotten that done for those communities, and we need to.
Liz asked a question: will co-location possibly lead to a greater drain on resources for matter of right schools?
I mean, yes. I mean, what they did in the budget the Budget Act was they said that if a charter school moves into a DCPS school, that they'll pay rent to that DCPS school, and that money will stay in that school. And so part of what they're trying to do is to say, you get a certain amount of money. It won't be a ton of money, but you get a certain amount of money by giving up half of your school to a charter school. And so on a dollars basis, it may not detract, but it will cap enrollment, right? If half the school is taken up by a charter school, it's impossible for the matter of right school to grow in that environment. And there's one gym, and there's one cafeteria, and there's one playground. And if there are two schools operating in the same building, then managing how those resources are shared, those resources get squeezed in a different kind of a way, and that will make it more difficult. So the co-location is a way to head off the growth of DCPS at the pass by taking over chunks of its infrastructure, and then there's no way for it to grow. And then you have two schools under the same roof, and you have two sets of administration that you're paying for under the same roof, and you're not directing the dollars into the classroom in anything like the way that you would want to, and you're making it very difficult for the matter of right school to continue to grow.
So Marion notes, is there any concern about the comparison students might make, which will be inevitable? I guess if they're co-located. So like if you have students looking across programs.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of competition is become central to education reform. And it may well be that, having different things that are happening in different places, and a sense of, well, if somebody else is doing something, maybe we ought to be doing it too. That might be healthy. Khadijah in her comment before about, oh wow, you're doing partnerships with universities. That could be a good thing. Maybe charter schools should be doing the same kind of thing. But when you have folks under the same roof, the nature of the competition between the schools is going to be, and you see it wherever wherever there's been co-location around the country, how they are not at each other and competing with each other, and in some senses undermining each other. Of course that will happen. And so it is an invitation for an unhealthy environment that's likely to be harmful to both schools, but certainly will be harmful to the Manor of Right School.
Sorry, I was on mute. Co-location is tough. Sharing space is tough under one principal, Sandra notes, even tougher under two. Then there's accountability, safety, etc. All things may not align. Nzinga has a good question. The comprehensive plan has a lot of info in it, and the hearings are next week. Any tips for community members who haven't been following the document developed, but have strong opinions on expanding modernizations or efficacy of co-location?
Well, I mean, the C4DC has looked at the comp plan, and we can share the document and the comments that we've come up with. But actually, I mean, you don't have to be an expert. The big picture issues, if somebody is very concerned about completing the modernizations east of the river and wary about the idea of co-locations, testify to that effect. Sign up to testify and say that you think that whatever is done on the education element, it should very strongly encourage the completion of the modernizations east of the river as soon as possible, and that the idea that the comprehensive plan would encourage co-locations is a mistake, and please and urge the council to take it out. You don't have to be an expert on the issue in order to make those two important points, and making those points in testimony it sends a flashing yellow light on this element. And I want to be clear, like, it isn't about, I'm not talking about the whole comprehensive plan. People have different ideas about the whole comprehensive plan, but this element, we want the council to step back, take a look at this, make modest revisions so that it reflects a really positive vision for what we want to do with education in the coming years.
Thank you. Marla asks, notes co-location is huge in NYC. Have we studied the impact there?
You know, I personally have not studied it. I think there are people who have studied it closely. I had been on a call with Christina Henderson, and I asked Christina Henderson what she thought about co-location, and she worked in New York at a time when co-location was happening, and she said she was shocked when she saw it in the BSA. She said it was so destructive in New York City, in the kinds of things that people have anticipated in the chat, and in the competition between schools under the same roof, in the duplication of administrations. So I think the New York City experience is pretty negative. Now, to the extent that it is not been negative, it's because of a factor that is very different from the district. There are schools in New York that are like 4,000 student buildings. And the idea that you might co-locate a couple of schools inside of a 4,000 student building, I think, is different than the idea that you would co-locate a school inside of a 600 or an 800 student building, and then you'd get down to 200-300 student schools under the same roof. So my impression is, where it has succeeded, it's in giant buildings, and in New York City, it was overall pretty negative. And I think it's one good thing is that Christina Henderson is fully aware of that, and maybe that's a place to start to try to encourage making a change in this document.
One more thing I'll just note about New York, they also had some buildings that were designed later in the process for co-location, like with separate entrances and different things, which is different than anything we have in DC. We are at 8:15, so I'm gonna do a last call. I'm gonna read all the comments in the chat, and then I'm gonna close us out. And I believe that we still are waiting on the results for the election, so you all haven't missed anything. Okay, so Liz notes, didn't Two Rivers start out as a co-located charter in a Ward 6 school? If I recall, it was disastrous. The charter dominated the building and moved to expel the students in the public school. Oh wow. I don't know if Two Rivers started out as a co-location. I don't remember. Um, Lauren then noted, was it Mamie D. Lee where they were moved out largely due to a co-location that wanted to expand? Usually co-location leads to a privatization takeover. Sandra says Montessori was too. We had a mile-long wait list and unable to grow for years because we were co-located and we were both DCPS programs. Sharona notes um, that the move from Mamie D. Lee and Sharp Health to River Terrace was because most of the students lived east of the river. So both of those programs were consolidated into River Terrace Education Campus. Um, and then notes an example of co-location that was not the best was Malcolm X and Achievement Prep.
It was a disaster.
It was a disaster, Sharona adds.
Yes.
Laura says, but she remembers Sharp Community wanted to locate in Mamie D. Lee and they tried to fight for that. Sharona says she was not aware, but the way the building looked, it was not a great place for that. Agreed. Yeah, that was a population issue. Randall River Terrace is much better for them aesthetically and physically and was designed that way. Rhonda noted that she relocated from New York City last year as a principal at a co-located building during COVID. There are significant challenges with reopening with the current model. It should not be shared out. Agrees that Marion agrees. I think that she was one of the, or she, I'm sorry, I don't know if Marion's a she or he, but was part of one of the families that fought for that. Two Rivers did at Elliott Hine. Cosign did not work well. Rhonda saying it's not impossible, but it takes a strong partnership between building partners. I think Stokes and Maya Angelou are having a good experience. Kareem's normally here, so I'm gonna put that on the record, just because he always comes to our meetings. Khadijah notes they are co-located, and Khadijah, I believe you're at Rocket Ship with another charter, pre-K, which I believe must be Apple Tree. And there are separate cafeterias and separate entrances. You have to really be intentional with communication and alignment for it to be effective. You have to be on the same page. Yep, Rocket Ship, and yes, Apple Tree. Anything I missed?
You know, I just want to say on the co-location issue, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of strong feelings, and just to get out to say, don't do this where you are affirmatively encouraging co-location would be very powerful. The one kind of co-location that I actually think is could have promise is the kind of thing that Rocket Ship and Apple Tree, where it's different population, or there's the Bria had been located at elementary schools that did adult education with inside of an elementary school, where you're not at each other, but where you're complementing each other. That could make sense, but that's not what this idea about co-location that's being promoted now is. The idea about co-location that's being promoted now is it does appear to be to put two similar schools in under the same roof and invite the kind of competition and duplication that looks like a really bad idea every place that it's happened.
Thanks, Matt. Last couple of comments. Rhonda notes she's currently located at, wait a minute, AT at PSP. I don't.
Apple Tree at Perry Street Prep.
Oh, thank you. I was like,
the
wait
riddle.
a minute. Too many letters and I'm too sleepy. Y'all gotta forgive me. Rhonda is currently co-located at Apple Tree at Perry Street Prep. Agreed, Khadijah. Thank you, Sharona. Sharona also notes, to your point, Matt, it can work if the school communities aren't competing. All right. So, Matt, when does the sign up for the hearing close? Is it like a day or two?
Yeah, I think it's pretty soon. I think you can go online, and I think they're going to post the list on the 10th. So I have not, I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't dawdle. I'd go to the council website and to the calendar, and you can find it on the November 12th, the committee of the whole, November 12th and November 13th. You sign up and you don't know what day you're going to get. We'll all find out on November 10th.
Awesome. Okay, that is super helpful. Thank you. I just want to note that we do record all of our virtual meetings. So like we will post this in the next hopefully day or so. So if people want to hear from like what Ms. Davis shared or what Matt Frumin shared tonight, they can go to, we'll send out the YouTube link so people can watch. Because it's a committee of the whole hearing, I know people are super used to emailing Ashley Strange. I'm assuming that she is not the person to email to sign up, that it's going to be a different person. It's going to be probably one of Mendo's staffers.
Yeah, I think it's like it's like cow at dccouncil.us. It's not, I don't think it's a person's name, but it's not Ashley Strange.
Okay, that's super helpful. If we get that information, we'll try to share it out. Thank you, Monique. Cal at dccouncil.us is where you go to sign up for the hearing. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And then I want to call for us to adjourn. Oh, and of course, I want to thank Matt and Liz because they've been awesome. And Liz, thank you for hanging in there with us. Matt, definitely thank you for hanging in there with us. And thank you for answering so many of the questions that people have. We hope that next month is December, which is crazy to think about. Normally we would do a holiday party. It's COVID, so we haven't talked about what that's going to look like because we're normally all meeting out by December. But I thank you all for joining us this evening. A lot of thank yous in the chats for really a great conversation. And we look forward to sharing it out. So thank you all for joining us this evening. And we will see you all soon. Stay
Thank you,
safe and
Ebony.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.
You need
Thank
your
you,
sound
everyone.
for me.
Thank
I'll do my
you.
best.
Yes, I'm looking forward to my sound check.
I don't want anybody to get sick, and we haven't talked about it. So, and thank you, Khadija, for the congratulations. We'll figure it
Couldn't
out.
resist.
I know. Well, we were at the chateau last year.
Oh, the chateau.
Right, that's right. The chicken, yes, I definitely remember, and the cake.
And the cakes. So that was awesome. But we'll talk about it and see what makes sense because we like to at least be a bright spot. So
Thank you, Ebony, and congratulations again.
thank you. Good night, you all.
Night.